So you've probably used a lot of direct assessments in your courses all along, quizzes and tests and performances and essays, but you may or may not have used indirect assessment. One of the tools that I like best for indirect assessment is called a knowledge survey. The idea is that it's a lot easier to write very, very specific small SLOs for really tiny sections of your course than it is to write these big overarching SLOs. For every one of our learning outcomes, remember, we wanted to create an assessment for them. And it's hard to assess hundreds of little tiny SLOs for an entire course. So how are you going to get a quick measurement of how well you did on all of those small learning outcomes? And that's where knowledge surveys come in. So they are quick and valuable ways to get an inventory of what students think they learned. So a knowledge survey begins with a specific statement. This is based on your learning objective, but it's stated in a first-person way. It says, I can trace the path of electrons through a circuit. So a student is reading that and they think, I don't really know what you're talking about. I don't know what that topic means. Or, oh, I really know that. I'm confident I can answer that question and do that task right now. And maybe there's an in-between level. A lot of students are thinking, well, I certainly have heard of that, and I remember something about it. I could probably go look up the answer in just a few minutes to write a really good answer. And so we have this 3-point confidence scale that we give students. And for every one of our specific objectives stated in the first person, they tell us how confident they are that they could achieve that. And Moodle makes this very easy to accomplish as a questionnaire. A knowledge survey can be implemented as a quick 1, 2, 3 rankings, and my students are able to go through and rate over 100 different little mini first-person learning outcomes in about 20 minutes. And they do this at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester. And I can see how much they've learned on each one of those things, or at least how much they think they've learned. So let's see how this works. With the knowledge survey, I get this one plot that shows what my students did and didn't master. Here are all the different learning outcomes that I had in my course from the beginning on the left over to the end on the right. And the 1, 2, 3 scale, this is the average confidence of my class. We can zoom in and we can take a look at, I can create simple source-receiver energy diagrams. And in red, at the beginning of my course, my students had no clue what I was talking about. And at the end of the course, a vast majority of them answered they could really do that. I feel like I did a good job teaching them how to do their source-receiver diagrams. Let's look at an area where I didn't do quite as well. I can explain why sound travels faster in solids than gases. And in this case, the pre-score and the post-score are identical. Why did that happen? Well, for that particular objective, it turns out I didn't have time to teach it this semester, and so I had it in my survey, but you can clearly see my students didn't inflate things. They had no clue what I was talking about because I didn't teach it, and the knowledge survey tells me that. Third area, I can explain the difference between parallel and series circuits. Now, I thought I did teach that, and I had an activity where they were building series and parallel circuits, but you can see from the results, the students didn't feel confident that they learned it. And sure enough, when we had a test question about that on the final, they scored very poorly. But I had to go through and grade all of those poor responses on my final when my students could tell me before they even took the final, they knew they did not get that, which means that I did not design a learning activity that was effective for them. And so when I look at this plot, I'm able to quickly target areas that I can improve in my course. So these tools, even though they're indirect, give me a quick and easy picture of what my students actually learned and how well I did. And remember, the students are just taking about 20 minutes to accomplish this, once at the beginning and once at the end of the semester. For them, it works as a study guide right before the final exam. They have a complete list of all the things that they were supposed to learn, and the ones that they don't feel confident in, those are the ones that they should go study. So it works really well for them. And the other thing it forced me to do is it forced me to write very specific mini SLOs. What did I want my students to accomplish at every stage in the course? I had to spell it out at the beginning of the course before I even taught things. And that was very effective for me to help target what I wanted to accomplish on a very specific level. Knowledge surveys don't just work with sort of factual knowledge. We've had some instructors here at CSUN use knowledge surveys in the humanities. Instead of having to assign 100 different essay topics and having your students write essays about them and you having to grade all of them, maybe you could ask them, how well could you write an essay about the topic, what is profound understanding? And you can see from the results here that you actually can get some valuable information. In this particular case, some of the students felt they could do a really good job at that and they were very confident that they could write a good essay, and relatively few didn't think so. If you compare that to a different topic from the same course, what is the importance of lifelong learning? If that was your essay topic, more than 3/4 of the class feels like they could do a good job writing that essay. They feel like they grasp that concept much better. Now, you might be worried that their self-report is not always right. Sometimes students think they get something when they really don't. But what people have done when they've investigated this in detail is they found that overall, as a class, you get pretty reliable information. If your class says that they were confident about something on average, that means that it probably was a pretty good job of teaching that you did, and that the students really do know it. Individual students tend to overreport and underreport, but when you take them all together and get that class average, these plots that we show are reliable, and you can check that by seeing how they actually perform on these items, and it correlates pretty well with what they self-reported as a class.